So it's this idea that we as human beings assume we know everything we need at all times. It's an assumption that our brains make. And this is a study that was done on adults, but I'm sure it's even worse or more prevalent in students. We assume we know what we're talking about. If we're doing something, we know enough to be able to do it. It's your mom tells you, you haven't done this before, or you don't know what you're doing, stop. You're like, I can drive, Ma, I can drive, I know how to drive. That's just one small example. We do that all the time. And it's part of the human nature. It's how our brains work. So when you're studying, don't assume you know what's going on. When you see the word, don't assume you know. Check and make sure. Check yourself. Be reflective. It's that word I keep using over and over again. Reflective. If you're not going to be reflective, and you know adults do this too. You know that your parents do it. You've seen your teachers do it. You've seen adults on TV do it. They assume they know what they're talking about because they are not reflective. They don't check their work. They don't ask themselves, if this is true, then I should see this. How do I explain this? If this is true, why is this happening? If this is true, why is this not happening? Does that make sense? And then you have to start questioning, then is this true? And then maybe the answer it is. Maybe you're right, but maybe you're not. And you have to live in a place, and this is what I started the whole year with you, is this science comes from the viewpoint that we don't know what's going on. We just don't. We're making our best guesses based on experiments. And we're going to keep improving it. That's why science is always changing. We don't always know anything. We just say, look, this is what's happening. We keep adding carbon dioxide and temperature keeps going up. Maybe we should stop adding less carbon dioxide, just saying. And usually we're close to the right answer. But ladies, you need to separate. I think I've given you enough time to figure out what you're doing. No, you're not. You're right, but you're distracted. So why don't you go ahead and move? So being reflective is one of those key components. And what I mean by reflective, guys, is you look at your understanding and you make sure you're right. Do a problem. Gee, if I'm right, then I should be able to get this answer right. I'm not, man, I got that answer wrong. Maybe I'm not right. Maybe I have a misunderstanding. You have to be that way with everything. Because even me at my age, I make mistakes. Even though I've been doing this for 20 some odd years, that's not true. Jesus. I've been doing this that's true, but it's been, I don't even know anymore, 27 years. I've been doing this and teaching biology and science, and I still make errors. I still have misunderstandings. You cannot expect to know everything. And if you do, you're misleading yourself. And you're going to end up falling into these issues. It's not that you're not smart, it's that you're falling into the trap that a lot of humans fall into, which is we know what's going on when we really don't. And you can see it everywhere in your world. Your whole world is full of these people. All right, so be reflective. So let's go on and talk about one thing we know is a cell membrane. We all agree we know the cell membrane now. And the cell membrane is a phospholipid bilayer, but I'm not going to draw it as a bilayer. I'm just going to draw this yellow kind of boundary. And there are several kinds of cells. There are cells that have cell walls around them. What do you know about a cell that has cell walls around them? If they have cell walls, what do you know about them?
It's a plant cell?
That's a really good guess. So it could be a plant cell. That's correct. But here's what you absolutely know. It's not let me read. Not, it's maybe a plant cell, but it's certainly not animal. All right? Because animal cells do not have cell walls. So you really have to think about the organelles and which cells have which organelle. The plant cell wall is outside the cell membrane. Do you notice that? The plant makes a cell wall and makes it on the, just like you make nails and put it outside your body, right? To protect yourself. Do you see it? The hair, you make hair, right? And it comes out of your body, right? And so plant cells make cell walls, and the cell walls are outside the cells. Now, it's not outside their body, but it's outside their cells. And the cell walls themselves have tiny little holes that allow them to communicate information and resources. So there's these little tiny little holes that let fluids through. So water can come in and out this way. All right. So it's not like the cell walls separate them completely, but they do give the cells support for when there's too much water outside. Because what happens when something's hypotonic? When there's very little solute outside, what happens to the cell? Anybody? Sounds like a lot of people have to be. What is it? No, it doesn't. Hypotonic. Hypo means what? Some work. We have to do a lot of work here, or you're not going to do well this quarter. That's bad news. So hypo means low solute, salt or sugar, right? But so if it's low solute, what's the water? High water. They're opposite. So if water's high outside and the solute's not going to move, where's water going to move? From what? How do things always move? From high to low. Without extra energy, everything always moves from high to low. So if it's high water outside, water's going to go into the cell. Is water coming out? Sure, because it's random movement, but a lot less water is going to come out that's going in because there's so much more water outside. So things move from high to low and the cell swells. It swells up and will explode eventually if it keeps going, if it's hypotonic enough. Does that make sense? That's why plants need cell walls, because where an animal cell under these conditions would lyse, remember that word lyse? Would just blow out, right? Because water would keep coming in and in and in until it just expanded and blew up like a water balloon. It's overfilled, right? A plant cell can't move. An animal cell, you can. If there's too much water outside, you can move. So a plant cell can't. So a plant cell needs that cell wall. And then what happens to the plant cell? It fills up the entire cell wall and gives it what's called, I'm going to use the word, I don't think this is going to be on the test, but I'm going to go ahead and use it, Tuger pressure. That's the pressure inside the plant that stiffens it up. All the water inside the cells push against the cell walls, and then you get these stems. And the plant grows out from that and stiffens straight up. When a plant is wilting, it's because water's low outside. And if water's low outside, let's take a look at it. And it's not necessarily how much water, remember that. It's also how much what? How much solute's in the water. So if water is low outside, but there's high, that means it's high what? Solute. That's good. High solute. Excellent. At least I'm getting some people answering. That's great. High solute because it's low water. Then it's salty or sugar. You don't give a plant sugar water. Don't do that. Don't give a plant salt water unless it's a saltwater plant. They have ways of dealing with it. But if you give a plant salt water, then what you're doing is giving it low water, but high solute. And what's going to happen is the cell is going to, as someone said a minute ago, shrivel up. Because water is going to go from its high to its low. Yes, water is going to go in the opposite direction too, but not that much. Mostly water's coming out. So remember, we're talking about net, that word net, movement of water. What do we call something moving from high to low? What do we call that movement? A general word for that. I heard it. I heard someone say it. Diffusion is correct. Diffusion. But this is water, and because water is such an important thing, and because it works opposite the solute, if the solute goes from high to low, we call that diffusion. When water diffuses, we call it osmosis. And you'll see different words. Some of you will be doing some internships this summer at hospitals. You might see the word osmoregulate. What do you think they mean by that, osmoregulate? The kidneys osmoregulate your blood. What does that mean? Think about the words. Look at the root words, guys. Figure it out. I never told you, so it's not like you should know. It's not that you're not studying. You look at the word osmosis. What does osmosis mean? The opposite of solute movement is correct. It's the movement of water. So what does it mean to osmoregulate? No. It regulates the water. So kidneys regulate your water. All right, so osmoregulation is your ability to regulate your water. If you have too much water in your blood, then you have high blood pressure. If you have too little, then you have low blood pressure. Neither one's good. You want that what we call, remember the word homeostasis. And we're going to do an activity tomorrow that's going to kind of hopefully drive home the idea of homeostasis and equilibrium. Oh yeah, homeostasis will be. Homeostasis just means keeping it the same. We went over it previously when we looked at temperature. Negative regulation. So let's talk a little bit about feedback, and then we'll go back and look at these cells differences again. Homeostasis means keeping it the same. I told you that. Remember, the homeo means the same. And stasis means still. Keeping everything still, keeping everything the same, consistently. What's your temperature? What is your temperature? What is your temperature? You know your temperature. You've gone to the doctor, haven't you? What's your temperature? They stick the thermometer in your mouth, hopefully not in your butt, and they stick thermometers in your butt too, right? That's what they do in the emergency room. They'll do the non-invasive little swipe. That's not very accurate. So if they want an accurate temperature, they'll put in your armpit or they'll put in your butt. They want a core temperature. Yes, they do it to babies all the time because babies don't like to put in their, you put a thermometer in the mouth of a baby, what are they going to do? Spit it out or break it. And you don't want to do that. So, like I said, most of the time, who is in this hallway? You need to leave. Don't encourage them, please. So babies, yeah, you need to put in their butts because you can't put in their mouths, they'll break the thermometer. And the forehead thermometers are not very accurate. They're going to be a few degrees off, which could mean a big difference for a baby. They can't tell you they're feeling a fever. So yeah, if you want a core temperature, you got to go deeper. Armpit works well. Obviously, the butt works well because it's deeper in your body. You get a much more accurate measurement. So now, what is your temperature? I'll ask again. It is the same for most people. There's an average. What is it? Nobody knows what the temperature they are? Average human temperature. Huh? Close, 98.5. Some people, the number will vary, but it's around 98.5 degrees Fahrenheit. Aren't you guys taking health? Okay, well, in order to talk about diseases, you need to know how you react to a disease, don't you? How do you react to disease? You get a fever. How do you know that means you get what? It doesn't matter the disease. You get chlamydia, you get herpes, you get whatever. Guess what's going to happen? Guess what your body's going to do? Temperature's going to go up. It doesn't matter the disease. If you get a disease, one of your body's first reactions is to raise your temperature. How do you know if your temperature's high if you don't know what your normal is? You guys should all know what your normal temperature is. You should go find your thermometer at home and know what your normal temperatures are. You should know your basic status. What's your blood pressure? What's your blood glucose? What's your you don't know any of this, right? What's your blood type? What's your normal? Hey, I'm asking you a simple question. What is the temperature of your body? Your body. And you don't know. Doesn't that worry you? That's a hangnail. It varies, yeah, but and that's where I was going to go in a minute. But here's what I'm trying to tell you guys: know your own bodies. I'm not kidding you. It's really important. It could mean the difference between you knowing if you're pregnant or not, you knowing if you're sick or not, you knowing if I'm sorry, people do get pregnant. I'm sorry, you should know your own bodies. You need to start learning your own body. What is your temperature? What is your blood glucose? Gentlemen and ladies, you should be doing what? At your age, probably yearly breast exams on yourselves, right? Do you know if you have a lump, what does that mean? And men can get breast cancer too. It's just a lot rarer. It's a lot rarer. If you don't know your own bodies, ladies and gentlemen, you're risking your lives. Is that clear? That means knowing your own poop, as well as I've mentioned numerous times, look in the toilet after you poop. What is normal for you? Is it too watery? Is it an odd color? Is it, excuse me, this is not a joke. Am I teaching elementary school kids? I'm sorry. Did I make a mistake? I thought I was dealing with high school kids. I thought I was dealing with people who are going to be adults soon. If you're going to be on your own, you need to know what the danger signs are. I would hate for you to have to walk around with pooping into a bag coming out the side of your body because you cannot recognize that you're bleeding into your feces. How do you know if you're bleeding into your feces? Blood in the stool. How do you know if you never look? Let me give you a clue. You don't. You have to look. What does blood in the stool look like? If it's a hemorrhoid, if it's a bleed that's closer to the anus, then it'll be red. And for guys, that messes with our heads, right? Because we're guys, we're not used to it. Women are used to seeing red blood because they have their periods. Correct, ladies? That's normal for them. But it's not normal when it's not your period if it's in your feces, right? So that should be a concern. But again, how would you know if you're not looking? if you're just too grossed out to even look. Come on, guys. And now, if the poop is tarry, you know what tar is? If it's black and thick looking, that's a danger sign. That means you're bleeding up in the upper GI, in the upper colon, in the small intestine. That can mean cancer. If you catch it early, it can mean a small surgery. You catch it late, they have to remove entire parts of your intestines and stick bags on your side and stick a feeding tube into you and feed you with a feeding tube the rest of your life. Good luck. And by the way, colon cancer is on the rise. Kids 20 years old. So I moved one person and still the side conversations still go on, just pointing it out. So the number one, colon cancer is increasing in kids 20 years old. Not much older than you. We think it's all the processed food and sugar you guys are eating. We think it's your diet. I mean, it makes sense, right? Colon cancer, increased if we're talking about kids 20 years old walking around with bags out the side of their bodies to poop, they have to empty it once a day. Come on, man. Is that what you want? So you got to start thinking about some lifestyle changes and also measuring your own normals. What is normal for you? If you don't know, that's a sad level of ignorance. That's not acceptable. Okay? Blood glucose. Measure it. You have people that are diabetics in your family. Ask them to borrow their kit for a second. Ask them to test your blood sugar. Every once in a while. Do you know how I found out I was diabetic? I just tested myself, just for fun. I didn't know. I had no idea. Then I'm like, oops, I'm diabetic. And thank God I found out. And I didn't have to go blind or lose my foot. Yeah, you go blind and lose your kidneys and die or be on dialysis for a lengthy period of time, then die. Lose your fingers and toes. There's all kinds of bad things that happen. Legs. Thank God I found out by randomly testing myself. What is your normal? And when are you worried when you're not normal? So what does normal mean? Normal means average. The word normal actually means average. So when we say the average of 98.5, obviously if you got a thick sweater on and coat and you're inside, you might be getting hot. But eventually, let me use a different color. Eventually you're going to start to cool off by sweating, and you're going to start to cool off. And if you go outside, you might get real cold, but you start to shiver. And then you might get hot again, and you'll get cold again, and you'll get hot. But the average is what? The average for a lot of people, for some people it's 100. I don't know what your average is. I don't know. What is it? Measure it. Take it for a few months. Every few days, take a measurement. Right? Record it. I record on my health app all kinds of numbers. And I look at my trends, because I would like to live a little longer without being sick. So you look at normal. So you find the normal. And when you find the normal, what happens is, yes, you go high. There is a high. And yes, you get too cold. But you always change. You're always changing. If you get too hot, you do something to cool off. If you get too cold, you do something to warm up. So because they're opposites, because if you're cold, you do something to warm up, you're doing the opposite, we call it negative regulation. Negative regulation. Negative regulation helps you keep homeostasis. This pattern is the same pattern you get with a thermometer. If it gets too hot in your house, the furnace turns off. If it gets too cold, the furnace turns on. it does the opposite of whatever's happening so that it can keep the temperature the same. Homeostasis. But understand, it's dynamic. What does dynamic mean? The word dynamic, what does it mean? I told you before, we talked about dynamic equilibrium. So let's look at it. Let's take a look at a membrane with holes in it. A simple membrane. Just a couple little holes in it. And then I have a couple sodiums here, a few sodiums there, here. What's going to happen? These sodiums will move this way, but these will also move this way, correct? But eventually, both sides will get equal. Does that mean they stop moving? No. That means they move every one that moves this way, there's one that moves in the opposite direction, so there's no net movement. But because they're always moving, we call it what? Dynamic, because dynamic means moving, dynamic. And because they're equal, we call it equilibrium. So dynamic equilibrium is when everything keeps moving, and the way you do that is you do negative regulation. And that's with every part, every system in your body that uses negative regulation to keep homeostasis. You want to keep things the same at some set point. For most of us, it's around 98.5 on average. Some of us are 100, some of us are 98, 97. Some of us, that's it. But you get to 104, or you get to 90, now you got to start worrying. A few degrees would mess you up, could kill you. You have a baby with 105, 106 degree temperature, what do? If they're normal, babies tend to run a little hotter. Let's say their normal is 100 and they're at 105. What are you going to do? Doctor, emergency room. And what are they going to do? Well, I'll tell you what they used to do. They put them in an ice bath. Why? To cool them down. Do the opposite, negative regulation. They're too hot, cool them down. Today they don't do that. They'll put them in it. They have cooling bags that do it slower, so it's not a big shock. But you have to cool them down. If you don't, they're going to die. The fever gets too hot. Your body's reacting to kill the disease, whether they're STDs or not. They're trying to kill the disease, but sometimes your body goes too far. All right, so we're all good with this? We all see what we don't know? Are we highlighting what we don't know? And we need to make sure. Somebody came to me this morning, they said, look, it takes me a long time to memorize these things. I need to sleep. And they're like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. I'm like, I don't know either. All I can tell you is you need index cards, you need practice, because that's the only thing that gets in long-term memory. Using it, use the words in a sentence, in conversation. Don't waste your time at lunch. I know you have socializing to do. Understand that. Look, I sympathize with you. Make jokes using homeostasis, dynamic equilibrium. Tell somebody they're dynamic. Tell somebody you're negative regulate. I gotta pee. Instead of saying I gotta go pee, I gotta go to the bathroom, say I gotta go osmoregulate. It sounds funny to you. You think it's a joke. But you know what? Kids that play like that, kids that use words in play, okay, they learn the words. And they're not stressing. Like, communicate. Use the words you know, fine. And obviously you don't want to do that with someone you just met. But if you're in a class with some people, you're having lunch with them, and you know you got to practice homeostasis, diffusion. You're going to go make some Kool-Aid, say, hold on, I got to put the Kool-Aid in and make sure it diffuses well. Say what now? Yeah, tell him that. I don't know what he'd do. I have no idea if he knows what it is. Probably he does. Probably he would appreciate it. So, in any case, I don't know what the answer is, but I do know if you need to know these terms. And I've given you practice in class. I'm going to continue to give you practice in class and homework, but you have to put them on index cards. You have to use the words. I can't do that for you. All right, so that's homeostasis. That's keeping it the same. Now let's go back and look at the cell types because that's important. So you have plant cells. What do plant cells have?
A cell wall.
That's good. They do. They do have a cell wall. You're right. I wonder if my pencil's ready. I know I'm not. Yeah, good. So plant cells, they have, well, of course they have cell walls. And I've told you a million times before, but I'll say it again. They're made of cellulose. That's the stuff you're writing on. That's the stuff you're sitting on. That's some of you have wooden pencils. That's what you're using to write with. There's cellulose is the sugar. It's a bunch of glucose molecules all bound together, all covalently bonded together. All right, so cell walls. What else do plant cells have? Well, plant cells are eukaryotes. Well, first of all, they have a cell membrane. So they have a cell membrane. You should be able to draw this out. You want to know, I could give you pictures. You have pictures in your books. I've given you pictures. I've given you activities, but honestly, you want to know if you know it or not, draw it and label it. If you can't draw it and label it, then you got problems. You need to figure out what it is. Cell membrane. And we've gone into what a cell membrane is, that it has integral membrane proteins, that what goes in and out, we'll go over it again, but there it is. You know that it has membranes, it's a eukaryote. So because it's a eukaryote, let me use a different color here for eukaryote because I want to make sure that everybody sees this is a very important designation. That means not only does it have eukaryote means it has a nucleus, and it has membranes inside, and one of those membranes is a nucleus. Again, you did this all in chapter 7. There should be no doubt that this was important, this was expected, that you knew. Yeah. No. Yes, you may. There's DNA in the nucleus. There's DNA in the nucleus. That's where the DNA is. That's what the nucleus does. Is it houses the DNA. All right? And this is where something called transcription happens. That's our next unit. It's transcription, translation, genetics. Then the cell membrane, I hope you know by now, the cell membrane controls what goes in and out. Controls what goes in and out. The cell wall supports the structure. Of the cell. And as a side benefit, protects against lysis. Another membrane, I'm going to use a different color even though I'd like to use yellow, but I think yellow would just start to meld together. It's part of it actually is connected directly to the nucleus, and it winds around like this, They're folds. These are folded membranes. Folded membranes. Do we understand that? Where they have a rough. At the beginning, they have a bunch of rough ones. A rough part of the membrane. It's all one giant membrane, all connected to the nuclear membrane. This is the nuclear membrane there where the nucleus is. Then it turns into a smooth. These are called the rough endoplasmic reticulum and the smooth endoplasmic reticulum. Rough endoplasmic if you want to know what the words mean, rough, why is it rough? Because there's little rough dots on it. When you look at an electron micrograph in your book, you'll see little rough dots on it. Endoplasmic because it's inside the plasma of the cell. The plasma is the liquid part of the cell, also known as a cytoplasm. So this liquid part is a cytoplasm. Cyto meaning cell, plasm meaning liquid. Plasma means liquid or fluid. So rough endoplasmic reticulum. Reticulum means folded. Rough endoplasmic reticulum, the rough folded membrane that's inside the plasma of the cell. Then you have the smooth endoplasmic. This should not be new to you at all. This should all be review. Is this new to anyone? Everybody's turned in their chapter 7 notes. They said they read the whole chapter. They made their index cards with the flip boards, one for each organelle, what they are and what they do. Correct? Okay. Rough endoplasmic reticulum makes proteins that are leaving, well, let me just put it this way, going into vesicles. Vesicles are little round segments of membrane, little bubbles of membrane. And when you put these proteins in the membrane, the proteins in the membrane, then they have to be made inside the rough endoplasmic reticulum. Is that clear? Yes? So any proteins that are going to be either going into a membrane in the cell or being put out of the cell. What proteins get put out of the cell? What kind of proteins in your body get put out of your cell? I've mentioned several of them. What proteins in your body does your body just kick out of the cell all day long? Every day you're putting them out. There's so many it's hard to count. No, I said proteins, not ions. Huh? Hair. You're growing hair all day long. That's a protein. It's coming out of cells. Fingernails are growing every day. Snot. It comes out of your nose all the time. Saliva.
Yeah, she said that.
Saliva coming out of your mouth all the time. All kinds of gastric juices. Do y'all hear what I'm saying? Instead of worrying about all this, a lot of distraction. Your grades, a lot of people are worried about grades and fixing old stuff and etc. But you're not worried about tomorrow? This is December 4th. I'm stressed out. I was so happy we didn't have a snow today. I don't even know what to tell you. Today's the 2nd. December 2nd. You only got a week or two, and you got your finals. And you're sitting here, and I can tell by your faces you don't know the organelles, and you don't know what they're doing, even though you're supposed to, even though you did activities. You've forgotten over Thanksgiving break, I don't know. But those flip cards you made, I had you make them so you can study them. You have to know these organelles. You got a lot of work to do, or you're not going to do well. I want you to do well, so work at it. And stop distracting yourselves in class. Move yourselves. Be proactive. Be reflective. What's working? What isn't? All right, have a good one.